You're tuned in to the HR Bandit podcast, your one-way ticket to the latest and craziest in the world of work. In partnership with Timber Media, podcaster for India Inc. is sponsored by Adrenaline E-Systems Limited.
Hey, welcome to HR Bandit. This is Ankita and I'm so glad to have you join us for our best one yet. If this is your first time here, a big welcome. If this is you returning, an even bigger hug to you. April came, saw, and brought chaos, and we are here to make sense of it all. From big headlines to hidden gems, this is your April recap on the biggest news from the world of work. Apoorva, let's get into it.
Before we jump in, Ankita, there's something I've been dying to ask you. Are you revising your word of the year 2025 from show up to tariffs?
Short answer, I'm not. I would have, but I think there's so much that infuriates me about the world at the moment. And given everything else that's happening, tariffs is amusing at best. If I had to change my word of the year, I would likely change it to peace. And that is because with all the wars and acts of violence, I don't think tariffs is where my focus is right now. Even though I know my stocks are being upended, but I think it keeps news interesting, but not enough to replace it as my word of the year.
I think we can all do with some peace in our lives right now. But you know what's the other word that might just trump tariffs? Well, it's Trump. It's Trump himself. But anyway, bandits, before we make into a podcast about the world economy and geopolitics, let's jump into our 3 hot topics for April. First up, we are talking DEI. Well, yes, because like in most months in 2025, April had a lot on this topic. But what caught our eye is the Harvard University show of courage. Ankita, while we will cover this topic, let's take a resolution to not talk about DEI for the next few months. Anyway, second, we'll unpack the whole middle management layer of conversation, what it means for people practices and workforce planning. And finally, we will dive into Google's move to prevent its AI talent working for competitors. So grab your coffee, your chart, or whatever fuels your fire, and let's get into it.
Okay then. For our first story, Harvard University is making news for defying the Trump's administration's demand. They're not going down without a fight when it comes to their DEI initiatives. Now, Harvard is taking a bold stance against the White House's sweeping demands for control over the university's governance, hiring, and diversity politics. And let me tell you, the gloves are off on this one.
Absolutely. The Trump administration has been on a fight against DEI programs, framing them as hotbeds of anti-Semitism and ideological bias. But Harvard is having none of it. While the federal authorities have threatened to freeze a huge $2.2 billion in research grants and a $60 billion contract with the university if they don't comply with the administration's directives, Harvard's president, Alan Garber, says that they won't be bullied despite all this. In a strongly worded letter, Garber made it clear that Harvard won't surrender its independence or relinquish its constitutional rights. He said that the university cannot allow itself to be taken over by the federal government.
This is a real David and Goliath situation, with Harvard standing up to Trump administration and the quickly evolving situation. And they're not the only ones. Other schools like Columbia have also faced the chopping block for refusing to play ball. Ed Mitchell, president of the American Council of Education, said Harvard's stance could be a roadmap for how other institutions can resist the administration's incursions into academic autonomy. This goes beyond just the DEI issue. I think it's about fundamental independence of academic institutions and their ability to govern themselves without political interference.
I think Harvard is also setting an example for not just other academic institutions, but even organizations that are balking under the pressure. However, there's a few other things happening in the DEI space. There's a big US retailer by the name Target is facing a backlash because they balked under the administration pressure and scaled back their DEI goals. This led to a 40-day boycott led by Jamal Bryant with over 110,000 pledges and protests outside Target's headquarters. As of April 17th, 2025, the Target CEO actually met with Al Sharpton to discuss the company's rollback of its DEI initiatives, and they described the outcome of the meeting as very constructive and candid, though specifics were not disclosed, and that further action would depend on Target's commitment to the Black community. So this shows the power of community when we are united and stand against policies that we don't believe in. Additionally, a recent survey by Paradigm, which is a culture and inclusion platform, where they polled over 400 employers to assess shifts in DEI strategies amid growing political legal pressures, found that despite the backlash, only 19% of companies are cutting DEI funding, 54% are maintaining their budgets, and 23% plan to increase them. So while many organizations are quietly adapting their approaches by removing representation goals, tweaking language, and scaling back programs, we also have organizations that are standing up. And maybe in an episode few months down the line, we will talk more about what those organizations are doing.
Yes, it is a highly evolving landscape. Apoorva, take a breath and take us into the next topic.
Okay, so here's our next story. Microsoft is reportedly preparing for a fresh wave of layoffs in May 2025, with middle management roles to be the most affected as the company seeks to reshape its organizational structure and boost engineering efficiency. The planned job cuts, first reported by Business Insider, are part of a broader strategic move to reduce layers of management. The company is said to be aiming for a more streamlined hierarchy by increasing the span of control for managers, having each manager oversee more employees. This shift is designed to cut bureaucratic overhead and prioritize hands-on technical contributions within project teams. The restructuring will primarily target middle managers and program or product management roles, positions that are considered non-essential in Microsoft's current push for operational efficiency. Internally, the company is reportedly focusing on reducing what's referred to as the PM ratio, which is the proportion of managers to engineers across teams.
This reflects a broader industry trend amongst tech giants towards flatter, more agile operations, and I can see the reason behind it, and to some extent also agree with it. In December 2024, Google CEO Sundar Pichai announced a 10% reduction in vice president and management positions to flatten its hierarchy and accelerate decision-making. These moves aren't just limited to the tech industry, with companies like EY, Bayer, HSBC, to name a few, also implementing measures to reduce management layers.
And while all of this is happening across multiple organizations, what does this mean for HR teams? So one is, of course, promotions to middle management will be difficult and slow. So we need to look at alternative career growth strategies to help to keep our employees engaged and give them a career path. So for example, Shopify has something called as a dual track promotion plan, which they introduced in March 2024, which offers employees two distinct career paths, one for individual contributors, which they call crafters, and another one for managers. Now, many companies actually have had these separate tracks for a while, but I think HR teams could take a step further and help people from IC tracks once they reach a mid-career level or even a senior career level to transition to senior management positions, which we don't see happening often.
Yeah, I agree. I think we are definitely seeing it getting more challenging to promote people into manager layers and then obviously grow them up that path. I also think there is something to be said about internal rotations that we've traditionally seen and thought of career growth vertically and like when I think back to most CEO preparation rotations, they've gone through multiple years, if not almost a decade of rotational plans. And the truth is you can't really be a C-suite executive with a narrow set of skills and by being just someone who's rushed up the ladder quickly. So I know we've discussed this on the pod before. We do need to create promotion plans for ICs and for managers, but I think we need to redefine what employee growth looks like by actually rotating people across horizontal moves, even if they don't like it. Like, I think genuinely having exposure to multiple fields versus just one is immensely valuable and highly underrated.
I partly agree with that. So I do think incentivizing lateral promotions and helping people with lateral promotions is something to look into, but that's not the only solution. Like, often domain and contextual knowledge is required for employees to succeed, and also for organizations to benefit from those domain-specific skills. And lateral rotations can impact that. So incentivizing lateral moves is one thing, but there also has to be a way for people to progress within their domain and existing role without necessarily moving to team management. And that's where I think I would take an example from our own function, the HR function, where if you look at many big tech companies that now have HR business partner roles and HR line partners or HR partner roles, the HR BPs as a role is becoming highly specialized, and you would see that even at pretty senior level, you would find individual contributors doing that role and eventually moving to a senior management position, like after they have transitioned from an IC role throughout their career.
I can't believe you lumped HR VPs into specialized, whereas they're always touted as generalists. But with that, I'm going to take us to our last and final topic. It's one I've had to look up the moment I came across the headline. And that is that Google is paying its AI engineers to do nothing for a year. Now, of course, like most headlines, it is highly sensationalized. The fact is that Google has been using lengthy, non-compete clauses and extended notice periods in their employment contracts to essentially lock down DeepMind employees. The idea is to prevent these AI experts from taking their skills and knowledge to rival companies. But according to Nando de Freitas, forgive me for butchering his name if I have, he's a former DeepMind employee who's now at Microsoft and says that this is causing a lot of despair among current DeepMind staffers. He goes on to say that this seems to be a widespread practice at DeepMind, with the company apparently willing to pay people to do nothing for months on end just to keep them from jumping ship. Google, for its part, is defending these tactics, saying that the contracts are in line with market standards and that the non-competes are used selectively to protect the company's legitimate interests. But many are questioning whether that's really the case. Locking down talent for up to a year seems like an extreme measure, even in a highly competitive industry like AI. Now, we're going to keep a close eye on how the situation with DeepMind continues to unfold. The battle for top AI talent is only going to intensify in the years ahead. So it's not surprising that tech giants like Google are getting pretty creative in efforts to hang on to their best and the brightest.
Yeah, I was definitely surprised when I read this, but then I also thought about it and recalled that how a lot of Indian companies I know do have a 90-day notice period clause, which are actually enforceable. But a year and several months definitely sounds like a huge stretch. I'm sure these employees would have signed these clauses at the time of hiring, and if they have willingly accepted them, they can't really complain later. But having said that, I wonder if Google is being short-sighted here. I mean, imagine if I'm tied to my employer with no work against my will, even though I'm getting paid, but I'm not really happy. I could actually really damage the team morale if I wanted to. So I really hope that companies realize that the short-sightedness can have some long-term impact on their team culture, and that the cons of keeping disgruntled employees who can't wait to leave far outweigh the pros.
That is true. I also don't think it's just Google. Having a 6-month notice period is not unheard of in Europe, right? Like, depending on seniority level, the notice period keeps changing. Some people actually look forward to just sitting at home for 6 months, being put on garden leave and not having to work. However, I think in the field of AI, where things are changing so swiftly, the context is completely different, and hence it's natural for the anxiety for anyone who's stuck for 6 months, even on just garden leave, to be unable to work. And then on top of that, even if they have a 6-month non-compete period from their exit date, it's pretty damaging. So yeah, it's interesting what's happening here.
Yeah.
Okay. With that, I'm going to put a bow on our April's recap. It's wild how much the month had going on. Like every time we opened the news, there was something new popping off. And usually while we have a whole buffet of HR stories to choose from, this month, Apoorva, like you said at the start of the show, a lot of it was about tariffs. And I promise next episode, we're going to try and reduce the amount of tech talk we do here and also maybe capture a whole wider range of industries.
Yes, Bandits, that's a promise. You should hold us accountable for. Anyway, here are 3 other things that you should know from the month of April. First, Keith O'Brien, an alleged spy for Deel, confesses in an affidavit that he coordinated with Deel CEO Alex Buazes to gather information on competitor rippling. We covered this story in our previous episode, so if you haven't, go ahead and listen to that to know what this is about. Second, a 2B survey reveals that 84% of Gen Z workers stream shows and movies while working from home, while 48% admitting to lying about it to their bosses. So looks like Jamie Dimon may have reasons to be concerned. And lastly, several units within Google have told remote staffers that their roles may be at risk if they don't start showing up at the closest office for a hybrid work schedule. This is according to internal documents which have been viewed by CNBC. Some of these employees were previously approved for remote work. So that's our April roundup. And as always, if you've enjoyed this, hit us up with a rating, a review, or just slide into our DMs with your take. We love hearing what's landing with you and what you want more of.
Perfect. With that, we will be back next month with more chaos conversations and hopefully less tariff talks. Next month is especially important for us, Bandits. If you've been around for a while, you know why May is special. But if you don't, we will tell you shortly. So stay tuned. Until then, on behalf of NHRD and Apoorva, this is Ankita and we are out.
You're tuned in to the HR Bandit podcast, your one-way ticket to the latest and craziest in the world of work. In partnership with Timber Media, podcaster for India Inc. is sponsored by Adrenaline E-Systems Limited.